My partner and I negate the resolution resolved the United States should accede to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court for the sole contention of the International Criminal Court is fundamentally flawed. Subpoint A. The ICC is ineffective and lacks support. The International Criminal Court lacks support due to its flaws. A motive in 21 states, quote, today there are more than 120 states in the world that have signed this document, but the number of those that recognize the legitimacy of the ICC is much smaller. Virtually all nuclear powers have withdrawn. These include China, Israel, India, Turkey, and Russia. Not only America, but also many European powers criticize the ICC for lacking real political and legal power. The ICC has no power structure of its own, nor a single police unit, which makes it difficult to find and arrest the accused. The ICC is regularly criticized for not being able to operate in countries with strong economies and military forces. The court has only taken 6 criminal cases to its logical conclusion, and all of them involve only defendants from African countries. Only 4 people were convicted, unquote. The ICC is ineffective and lacks the ability to enforce its rulings. Subpoint B, corruption. The ICC is actively losing trust. As a motive in 21 says, quote, today the ICC does not have the necessary publicity among the civilian populations in the different countries, so ordinary residents do not trust the ICC officials during investigations. The level of distrust grows because the ICC's funding sources are not publicly available. Specific donors are always hidden. In the 19 years of the ICC's existence, more than $1 billion has been credited to its accounts, unquote. Subpoint C, the ICC lacks checks and balances. The ICC isn't held accountable. As Grove 09 explains, quote, for the first time, a permanent international institute is entitled to determine the legal obligations of states and their individual citizens and to criminally punish those individual citizens, even if its understanding of the law radically differs from the relative state's position. The ICC judges are not otherwise subject to the supervision or control of the state parties except in matters of personal corruption. Thus, when the ICC determines what international law requires in any of its areas of competence, this is arguably the final word, unquote. Without significant checks on its authorities, the ICC is able to violate its own principles. Krasowski in 24 points out, quote, in its practices, the ICC has repeatedly violated both the provision of its own statute and generally recognized norms of international law. Among the most obvious violations are attempts to exercise jurisdiction over acts allegedly committed on the territory and by citizens of states non-party to the Rome Statute, unquote. Subpoint D, witness tampering. The ICC's court proceedings are skewed due to the ICC's flawed system. Cryer in 14 says, quote, there were also significant allegations of witness tampering in the ICC's Mbaga case, more recently the Kenya case, although by no means just these have been plagued by allegations of witness tampering. Many of the problems stem from the difficulties of having an international criminal court that are not part of the comprehensive criminal justice system, which has an enforcement arm. The difficulty is that in the absence of its own police force, the criminal justice system, it is difficult to detect and importantly prevent interferences with witnesses, unquote. Subpoint E. The ICC helps maintain dictatorships and stifles peace processes through militarized solutions. The efforts of the ICC have caused more harm than good. Clark 18 says, quote, the ICC has contributed to the militarization of the Uganda Congolese government responses to armed actors in the region. By making peace talks less feasible and encouraging the militarized capture and arrest of suspects, the court has effectively legalized violent conflict and made armed behaviors by states more rather than less likely, unquote. Subpoint F. The ICC systems can be abused for political gain. Rafada in 23 says, quote, states have political, geostrategic, and domestic considerations in mind when referring a case to the ICC. To date, the cases brought before the ICC are characterized by a complete absence of national proceeding, and this has led to arguments that admissibly is trumped due to inaction. The ICC itself encourages them to exercise the practice of self-referrals. In most cases, self-referrals have been used as a political weapon for state parties to advance their own agenda. The potential for manipulation when a state initiates a voluntary referral to the ICC derives from the government's motivation to bring an opposition group before the court. In reality, states use the ICC for political and military reasons, namely to pursue their enemies rather than to provide justice. The unfortunate reality is that the Rome Statute leaves plenty of space for states to do so, unquote. Thus, we negate.
Partner ready?
Yep.
Partner's ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Okay. I will begin. My partner and I affirm the resolution resolved the United States should accede to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court for the following 2 contentions. 1, U.S. support for ICC effectiveness, and 2, reparations. Our framework is based on the principle of justice, which demands both accountability for atrocity crimes and reparations for victims. By acceding to the Rome Statute, the United States would strengthen the ICC's ability to promote global justice through prosecution and the provision of victim-centered reparations. Contention 1, U.S. support for ICC effectiveness. The U.S. can make the ICC work more efficiently. Dickinson 23, quote, the United States could overcome restrictions on rendering assistance to ICC efforts to bring justice to foreign nationals accused of atrocity crimes, unquote. Coalition for the ICC 16 explains the power that the U.S. brings to the ICC. Quote, the U.S. can demonstrate its renewed commitment by exerting influence within the Council to protect against abusive veto practices and to ensure political interests do not block the Court's common mission to enhance global peace and security through justice and accountability, unquote. Subpoint A, Colombia. Impact, you also support the ICC's global justice reforms. ICC project explains the situation in Colombia. Quote, Colombian government forces allegedly killed thousands of civilians, claiming that they were guerrillas killed in combat to show positive results of the Colombian government policies, unquote. Colombia establishing peace with the ICC is shown in Lobano in 21. Quote, the ICC endorsed the innovative transitional justice system stemming from the 2016 peace agreement with the FARC, unquote. Jorkdal 21, quote, Colombia's encounters with and responses to ICC demonstrate that states are able to maintain jurisdictional sovereignty and avert the launch of an official investigation by the ICC. This in turn enhanced the confidence of the Colombian judicial system and expanded its decision making. The Colombian judicial system victim-centered transitional justice approach that combines reparative justice with the aspects of rebutive justice for the crimes under the jurisdiction of the ICC, unquote. Therefore, by the U.S. joining the ICC, they would support global justice reforms in post-conflicts like Colombia. Contention 2, reparations. A great example of the ICC giving out reparations is shown in the DRC. Quote, Priest 23, quote, the ICC, quote, confirmed more than 30 million reparations package for thousands of victims of the DRC warlord Bosco Ntaganda, including former child soldiers. There are an estimated 7,500 victims of violent attacks, as well as 3,000 victims of crimes against child soldiers, unquote. January 24, the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan announced that his office would step up investigative efforts in the DRC. That investigation led to cases being brought up against 6 suspects, all former armed group leaders, unquote. Kasande 24 gives an example of the Uganda reparation issue in Uganda v. Ongwen. Quote, the reparations order had sparked controversy. Critics have questioned the feasibility of implementing such a large reparations award given the court's limited resources. The award underscores the ICC's recognition of the profound impact of Ongwen's crimes whilst exposing the limitations of existing reparations framework, unquote. This shows that America can step up and assist in reparations through the ICC Trust Fund. Dutton and Stereo 23, quote, supporting the trust fund for victims in the United States is in the United States' strategic interest. The United States has the resources and the legal tools to advance justice and to support survivors of atrocity crimes through the trust fund for victims, unquote. Fisher 24 explains, quote, the inclusion of reparative aspirations is a core feature of the ICC. Its reparations mandate to order that convicted perpetrators pay reparations to the victims of their crimes, unquote. OHCHR explains that not as seeing also affects the U.S., unquote. Justice must apply equally to all without exception. Upholding international law is not a selective process. It is a shared responsibility that strengthens rather than threatens global security, including that of the United States, unquote. For these reasons and many more, we affirm.
Ready for Kurt, please?
Yep.
Since I was first speaker, can I have first question?
Yep.
Okay, so looking specifically at your Colombia point, how does the United States acceding specifically help Colombia?
So basically we show you that with the U.S. expertise in this like Colombian justice reforms, well, by the U.S. acceding, they will help with these justice reforms through cooperation in these post-conflicts just like Colombia. So what do you mean like on your subpoint C of lax checks and on your subpoint B of corruption, like can you explain like how funding correlates to corruption?
Okay, so we can see with the funding being hidden from these specific donors that the ICC is being influenced by donors that the public doesn't know about. So it is providing this link into corruption through the funding being hidden and the ICC being influenced through this funding, as well as seeing the trust in the civilian population go down because of that. Okay, so looking at how does the United States specifically increase the effectiveness of the ICC?
So basically we show you that the ICC basically exerts influence within the Security Council, and we see that the ICC, that the U.S. can block these political interests from controlling the ICC. So we can see here that the U.S. has the influence and will make the ICC more effective. So how does the ICC exactly violate their own principles?
Okay, so we can see specifically from that Krasowski and 24 card, it shows you specifically that the ICC has tried to investigate actions allegedly committed on the territory and by citizens of states non-party to the Rome Statute, and that's going against their own statutes. So we can see that the ICC trying to prosecute these people is actually going against this, and we can see that it's able to do this because it lacks those checks and balances. Okay, so now exactly what was your impact under your subpoint A in your first contention?
Okay, so we didn't have an impact for, so under subpoint A, we had on Colombia impact, U.S. will support ICC's global justice reforms.
Okay, you got a question.
Okay, can you explain more on this Kenya case with your subpoint D of witness tampering?
Okay, so the Kenya case in that subpoint D of witness tampering is one of the two examples we give you in that card with the Kenya and the Lambaga case that show you that there was this witness tampering in those cases specifically. These two cards showing you that the ICC has this witness tampering sees that the ICC in the way that it prosecutes and the way that it is set up is what is causing this to be this witness tampering in these two cases.
Okay.
Okay, so looking at your victim trust fund, can the United States provide to this victim trust fund currently?
No, we can't see that here because basically I show you in Fisher and 24 that the inclusion of repetitive aspirations is a core feature of the ICC. I'm basically explaining that with the ICC having these having the structure for these reparations by U.S. seceding, they will fully execute these reparations.
Perfect. Yep, started now.
My computer's not really working right now. Like it's being slow.
Okay, do you need to
Maybe we'll
try again?
speed up once I turn it on.
Okay. Can you use Landon's for now?
Here, let me turn it back on again and see if
Okay.
it's like, sometimes if I turn it off and on, it stops being slow. Okay. Looks like it's loading now.
It's working?
I think so.
Okay, I'll continue prep then. You have about 30 used. One minute used.
Alright, stop.
Okay.
Is everybody ready? Alright then. Starting off on the front side of flow with my opponent's framework, they give the framework of justice, saying that whichever side best upholds justice should win. I say that a cost-benefit analysis is preferable because it considers everything, but we will still uphold justice. First of all, you can see that the ICC is not an instrument of justice, it's actually used for political gains. You can cross-apply a card from a font in 23 that tells you that the method that the ICC tries cases by self-referrals is a method that state parties use to actually advance their own agendas and pursue their enemies. That is not achieving justice. The ICC is not achieving this framework, so therefore you will con on this. And then moving on to my opponent's first contention about how the United States can support the ICC's effectiveness. They say that the power the United States brings would allow the United States to exert influence to prevent these like political interests. Again, you can see that this is unlikely to be true when we show you in our own case. that again the United States is always going to achieve its own interests first. It's only going to use the court like other states have used it, like our FONT 23 tells you, as a method to achieve its own aims. It's not going to be making the court more fair. My opponents also impact that out to Colombia. Again, we have a response to two main responses here. First off, my opponents have no warrant here because they say that they'll be able to help with justice reforms, like with this Colombia example, but that has already occurred, and they never show specifically where the ICC has a need that is met uniquely by the United States. Again, without that, the United States acceding to the Rome Statute does nothing to change this or make the ICC any more effective. And then second off, you can actually turn this because the United States is actually always harmful, and one way they do that is through the funding. Brahman 23 tells you, quote, funding dynamics demonstrate that the court is a tool of powerful states. Funding constraints are introduced when the court demonstrates independence and investigates situations that wealthy state parties would prefer they avoid. Many countries are behind in their mandatory contributions. Mechanisms exist to punish funding shortfalls, but they largely target poor countries that are not strategic allies of wealthy state parties. Budgetary allocations for victim support and defense counsel are comparatively small compared to other organs of the court. There's a relatively low amount of spending comparatively that is directed towards reparation and victim support. And the amount spent on administrative costs is substantially higher than operations, unquote. So again, what that tells you there is that the United States is always going to be harming the court because it's not going to give money to the court for things that that do not align with its interests, but it will give funding to things that it can use to pursue its enemies. That's always a harm that never achieves justice. Moving on to my opponent's second contention, talking about reparations, and specifically the ICC's trust fund for victims, I have two main responses here. First off, the United States can already donate to the trust fund for victims the way the ICC is set up. The United States is already able to donate, so they do not need to accede to the Rome Statute to achieve this benefit. So there's really no impact here because again, the United States could already do this and isn't doing this clearly. It's not in their interest. And considering this is voluntary, there's no telling the United States would change anything by Rome Statute. And then second off, again, when you can look again to that Brahman 23 card, according to that, very little of the money given to the ICC is being put towards these victims. Most of it is actually going to like operational costs and going to administration. So again, there's a much smaller impact here than my opponents would have you believe. So they're not actually going to be helping as many of the child soldiers and other people that they're claiming to be saving for. Moving on to the con side of Phil, you can see that justice is always going to be more benefited in the con side. We can see first off how harmful the ICC is. Amitabh 21 tells you how the ICC has no real enforcement mechanism, so it can't actually enforce its legal power. So even if it makes these decisions, they're not going to end up actually having any benefit. And then how it's actually corrupt. Again, Amitabh 21 tells you how its public sources, its funding sources are hidden, and then how it lacks checks and balances, as Grove in 2009 tells you that, and then how witness tampering actually makes its investigations themselves not very just, because again, without that police force, they're not able to prevent interference with those proceedings. And then we can see the ICC is actually harmful enough that it maintains dictatorships and stifles peace from Clark in 18. Again, when in Uganda, which my opponents mentioned, the governments there and working with the ICC actually led to peace talks being less feasible and conflict increasing. And then again, we can see that the ICC is always being used as a tool to achieve political gains and not as justice. There's no benefit in the world, and you're always going to prefer con.
I'd like to take that back.
Yep. Already used? One minute used?
I am up. Alright, opponents ready? Partner ready?
Yep.
Judge ready?
Mhm.
Alright, quick off the clock, I'm gonna be going framework convo, and with that, I'll begin. Starting with the framework in today's round. The framework is justice, and as we have starting on the pro side, we bring justice for having support for the ICC effectiveness and reparations. And with that, going on to my opponent's case, the Khan case, the sole contention talks about how the ICC is fundamentally flawed. The 7.8 talks about how it lacks support, and it was 6 cases and 4 of them affected, and those cases were from Africa. I have one response for this. First, African nations bring more cases to the ICC. The African bias of the ICC is therefore in many cases a system of African enthusiasm for the ICC. Indeed, African support was central to the establishment of the International Criminal Court, unquote. So you can see here that the Africa was essential to the establishment of the ICC, so they are not biased from that reason. Now going on to the subpoints B and C. B talks about corruption, and they talk about how it's not trusted, and C is lacks checks and balances, and it's personal corrupt and violates principles. I have one response for this, and which is there are checks and balances. Collation for the ICC, note 8, quote, a system of checks and balances is in place in the ICC and its governing body, the Assembly of State Parties to ensure the proper administration of justice, unquote. The judges and prosecutor have different mechanisms to control each other's imparity. Pre-trial chambers provide substantial oversight of the prosecutor, for example, in authorizing or not the opening of certain ICC investigations. There are all checks and balances in the ICC, and it won't have corruption. Now going on to the subpoint D with this tampering. They said there has been significant witness tampering, but however, I have one response for this, and knowing the witness is not good. Del 06, quote, a SAIA witness appeared in criminal courts revealed that 36% of witnesses have been directly threatened. 57% feared reparations. Prosecutors expect that a witness administration plays a role in 75 to 100% of violent crime committed in gang-dominated neighborhoods, unquote. So knowing a witness is not good, so that won't happen with witness tampering. Now subpoint E, they talk about support dictatorships. I have one response for this. First, it's a broad membership. The ICC know they quote 125 countries are state parties to the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court. Out of them, 33 are African states, 19 are Asia Pacific states, 20 are from Eastern Europe, 28 are from Latin American Caribbean states, 25 are from Western Europe and other states, unquote. Therefore, such a multitude of countries involved are not dictatorships. Nothing in the ICC shows supports for dictatorships. Now to subpoint F about political gain, I have one response to this. The US will have limited control. ICC know they quote, each state party only has one respective in the assembly who may be accountable by alternative and advisors. The Rome Statute further provides that each state party only has one vote, unquote. Therefore, realize we cannot take over the ICC. Now going back over my case, our first contention is US support for ICC effectiveness. Our opponents are trying to tell you that we are always achieving its own interests. However, we started a coalition for ICC 16 that the US can exert influence in the Council to protect and ensure political interests. Don't block the court's commission. Now to our subpoint 8. Our opponents say there are no warrants. However, we can tell you with the Colombia case that joining it, the ICC Colombia's encounters with the ICC enhanced the judicial system. And for reparations, they always say voluntary. However, reparations is a core value of the ICC, core feature.
Mr. First Speaker, can I have the first question?
You may.
Alright, so you just mentioned that there are like mechanisms to prevent there's checks and balances basically. What are those mechanisms?
Checks and balances. So, I don't have any specific examples of checks and balances, but there has been checks and balances put in place to the ICC and its government body. May I have a question?
Yeah.
Alright, so with your rebuttal, you talked about how our support will be with our effectiveness is unlikely to happen and always achieve our own interests first. How exactly will we be achieving our own interests first?
I mean, first of all, because like empirically the United States does things that achieve its own interests, like global wars it's involved in oftentimes have like something that's beneficial for the United States, like achieving oil or like getting economic benefits to the United States, but also you can see that other countries in the ICC empirically also use the ICC to benefit their own self-interest. I mean, it's clear that's what the United States would do too. I have a question.
You may.
Okay, so when you opposed like our political gains point, you said that there would only be one vote in the United States. But how does that specifically answer to like self-referrals, which is what our card mentions?
So with the one gain political, so you talked about your subpoint F was about political gain, and I didn't get to self-referrals, but with the one vote I was trying to get to, we won't. So each state member only has one vote in the ICC, so we won't be able to use it for political gain because we will only have one vote.
Okay.
And
But
then,
what prevents the United States from bringing cases that like it has an interest in, and then like using that to further its agenda?
I don't have any evidence to back that up.
Okay.
So may I have a question? So, with your subpoint B about witness tampering, how many, you talked about significant witness tampering, how much have there been of significant witness tampering?
I don't have the amount of like in all cases, but it does mention several cases and says that like many international courts, the ICC has, this is a prevalent issue that occurs in many of its cases, and it mentions the Kenya and the Uganda. And then the reason for this is because the ICC did not have a police force or like any enforcement to prevent this witness tampering from happening. So it can't even like find this interference, let alone prevent it from happening, basically.
Okay.
I have a question.
You may.
Okay. Where do you show that the United States specifically would be able to help the ICC in issues like Colombia?
So, with our Colombia point, we are showing you that Colombia's encounters has enhanced their judicial system. So when we join, we can also help enhance.
So how
Yes.
does the United States do that?
I don't have an exact assemble of that, and that's correct.
Prep time?
Yeah.
About 2 minutes left.
Alright, we can end it there.
Okay. 142 left.
Alright, quick off the clock. I'm going to be going over the pro side and then the con. Opponents ready? Judge ready? First, let's take a look at the pro side where they give you a framework of justice. But first, we show you that cost benefit is more preferable, as well as showing you that the pro side does not uphold justice as well as the con side upholds justice. First, we show you specifically to that subpoint F, where we show you that the ICC is being used for political gain, that the United States would use the ICC for this political gain, in turn corrupting the ICC even more and seeing less justice. So you can see the pro world is not upholding justice and the con world is. Then you can also see with their first contention of the U.S. support for effectiveness, first that the United States is bringing its influence, so we can see that there's going to be less effectiveness as the United States is going to push its own agendas, as again we show you specifically with that Rafada 23 card, where you can cross-apply that here again. We show you that the United States is bringing its own agenda and seeing less justice and less effectiveness actually go through that ICC. Then you can also see with their subpoint A that Colombia, you can see that there's no warrant here, as they never show you specifically how the United States is actually going to provide the needs of the ICC, and we can see that they never show you how the United States is actually going to make the ICC more effective. And we can see they again try and tell you that they enhance the judicial system, but again show you never how they actually do that. You can see that they don't show you anything here, and they don't show you actually at all how the U.S. would actually help this and support this. Then with their second contention of those reparations, you can see that the United States, it can already donate, so there's no difference in the United States acceding. And again, you can see that the United States acceding is not going to change, as the reparations are voluntary. As my partner showed you, the United States acceding is not going to change how these reparations work or how this victim trust fund works. So you can see the United States and these reparations are not going to change, and the pro world is showing you no justice and no increase in justice or anything like that. Then you can move on to the con side of the flow, where you can see our sole contention is the ICC is fundamentally flawed, where that subpoint A is showing you that it is ineffective in life support. They try and tell you that the African countries bring most of the cases, but again, the ICC chooses what cases to take. So again, you can still see this case bias happening as the ICC is choosing specifically only these African countries. Then you can see that subpoint B, corruption, going dropped as they just try and tell you that they have these checks and balances, but again, as they show you, there's no examples, and you can use that on their response to my subpoint C, where they again try and tell you that there are these checks and balances, but again show you never how these checks and balances are actually happening, or that there actually is these checks and balances. They just tell you that there is. Then with that subpoint D of witness tampering, they give you a card, but this card is telling you that there is this witness tampering happening. You give this 36% of witnesses were directly threatened, and this showing you that this witness tampering is actually happening, as this threatening of the witnesses is what this witness tampering is. They just show you that this witness tampering is happening, and they give you they give you more stuff on this. Then that subpoint E showing you that the ICC is maintaining dictatorships. They just tell you that there's broad membership. You can see that the ICC's cases that they are taking is what's taking this, so you can still see this maintaining dictatorships and technical peace. And that subpoint F again showing you that this is being used for political gain. That's why I need you to vote for a con world.
Prop 10?
Yeah.
A little over a minute 30 left.
Partner ready?
Yeah.
Opponents ready? Judge ready? Brief off the clock. I'll be going con pro. Okay. I will begin. First, I would like to start with the con. They talk about these fundamentally flows, and they say that justice is more on the situation. But as my partner explained earlier from their subpoint A of lack support, well, African nations bring more cases to the ICC from part in 18, because African nations join because of the global jurisdiction power of the U.S. These African nations actually do want to join the ICC because they know the ICC actually has the power of jurisdiction. Now, under subpoint B of corruption and subpoint C of lax checks, well, you can group these subpoints here because we actually see that there is lax in there are checks and balances here because a system of checks and balances is in place within the ICC and its governing body, the Assembly of State Parties, to ensure the proper administration of justice. Now, under subpoint D of witness tampering, well, we see, as my partner stated earlier, that witness tampering is not good from Deedle in 2006. A study of witness appearing in criminal courts revealed that 36% of witnesses have been directly threatened, 50% feared reprisals, and prosecutors estimate the witness intimidation plays a role in 75 to 100% of violent crimes committed in gang-dominated neighborhoods. Now, under subpoint E of supporting dictatorship, well, as my partner stated earlier, well, we see this broad membership here because we see that since there's we see a balance in power here with all these nations, such as 33 African states, 19 Asia Pacific, and 20 in Eastern Europe. We see that there's broad membership, and we don't see supporting dictatorship. So you can put this case down. Then under subpoint F about abuse for political gain, but the U.S. would have limited control from the ICC no date. We show you that the ICC actually keeps order, and the political interest of the U.S. will not block into the ICC. Now moving on to pro. They talk about cost-benefit analysis, and they say that we fit justice more. But we show you, they responded on our first contention about the U.S. support for the ICC effectiveness. They said unlikely, and the U.S. would achieve its own interests first. But we show you from the coalition in the ICC 16 that the U.S. can go over these boundaries and ensure that the ICC is not corrupt. Now, on our subpoint A of Colombia, impact U.S. to support global justice reforms. They say no warrant and already occurred no impact. Then they say turn U.S. harmful, many countries behind and contributions and reparations. But we show you we provide justice here in today's round because we are achieving justice because we are morally obligated, and it's a shared responsibility. So we must accede because we are seeing victims will suffer no prosecutions, and we will see that we are actually achieving justice.
You guys ready for cross eyes?
Yep.
Since we're first speaker, can we have first question?
Yep.
Okay, so how can you say that the ICC doesn't support any of these dictatorships if we specifically give you the example of the, specifically in that card, give you the Uganda example?
Well, you can see from our ICC No Day card that we show you that there's broad membership here, and so we basically explain that there's no support in dictatorship because with 125 countries, well, dictatorship, there's a lot of democracies in these ICC, and so we see here that unless you provide evidence that they actually go.
You have a question?
With your rebuttal about against our reparations contention, can I see the card after cross that says the U.S. can already donate?
Well, we don't give like a card specific for that. That's just the way that the ICC is run. Like that's just it's like you don't have to be a member. You don't have to be like a state party of the ICC to donate to that trust fund for victims.
You may have a question.
Yeah. So when you talk about how the United States can ensure the ICC is not like getting corrupt, did the card ever say like what is there to say that the ICC will do this? Like why would the United States want that when they have their own interests that they could like further instead?
Can you rephrase that question?
So like you read a card that says the United States can ensure the ICC doesn't become corrupt. What is there to say that they will do that?
Well, they will because we show you from Coalition and ICC that they basically block the political interest, and they will do it because they are morally obligated to provide for this jurisdiction. So can you do you have specific evidence on how many countries were behind in these mandatory contributions?
We never give specifically how many are behind in contributions, but you can see that many are, and also when you can see that powerful states are the ones that are usually most behind because they don't have, the ICC did not have a mechanism to punish these more powerful countries like the United States. You can see that there's no guarantee that the United States will actually end up providing this funding because there's nothing to force them to.
Okay, so how exactly in your rebuttal, you say that the United States will only have this one vote and one representative. How does that stop the United States from using their resources and reach that they would provide the ICC? And how does it stop the United States from using that to corrupt and use the ICC for political gain?
So with the one vote they have, I'm showing you that they won't use it for political gain, and so they only have one vote for each case or each thing that has happened, so they won't be able to take over and use corruption.
You have a question?
So, do you have specific evidence that very little is being put to the victims in terms of contributions to the ICC?
Yeah, we do. Dollar specifically tells you that it's usually about 2% of the total budget, whereas everything else is over that. Do you want to see that card? Or Lily, I thought you called for card.
Yeah.
Maybe you still want to see it.
Alright, you have about a minute 42 of prep left. One minute left. 30 left. Ten seconds.
Is everybody ready?
Mhm.
Okay. Starting off on framework, so preferably cost benefit analysis, but again, Con also provides for justice better. So the first vote in today's round is going to be the ICC itself and how it is not just. So first off, we show that it has no checks and balances when Rule 09 specifically tells you the ICC has jurisdiction to determine legal obligations of states and punish their civilians despite the different understandings. My opponents oppose this by mentioning the Assembly of State Parties, although they couldn't give any other specific mechanism. But again, the Assembly of State Parties is the states themselves, and we show that they are corrupt too, pushing their own political agendas, so that's always not going to be just. We also mentioned witness tampering. Again, a specific problem with the ICC from Amitov in 21 is that the ICC does not have its own police force, so it's not able to enforce its own rulings, making it ineffective, and not only that, but it's not able to keep its courtrooms fair and prevent this witness tampering, let alone detect it. That's always going to be a harm. And we also showed you with Clark in 18 that the ICC contributes to the militarization and maintains dictatorships. We mentioned specifically both Uganda and the Congolese governments, and also both of those areas saw peace talks become less feasible and violent conflict become more likely because of the ICC's involvement. That's always a harm. And then my opponents mentioned for our political gains that the United States would only have one vote. That does not change the fact that the United States can give self-referrals and funding. That's always a harm, according to Rafat 23. And then they also mentioned reparations, but again, the United States can already contribute to the trust fund for victims. Nothing changes after they ratify the Rome Statute. Same thing with Colombia. This already occurred. Nothing changes in the pro world, except that the ICC becomes more corrupt. And then again, looking specifically to the United States in the ICC, there are many ways that corrupt the ICC. First of all, funding. Rahman 23 gives you many examples of ways that, first of all, when state parties do not like the case being investigated, they can limit their funding, and the ICC cannot punish powerful states for this. Next of all, that they can promote more funding for cases that they prefer to be prioritized. And then again, those self-referrals. They can always increase the corruption of the court. And considering we're already seeing this happening, we're winning this point on probability because it already occurs when the United States already pushes their own agenda. They're only more likely to do it in the pro world, so that's always going to be a harm, and there's always going to be less justice. So considering that, please vote on today's round.
I'll take the rest of it.
Okay. 130 left. One minute left. Thirty left. Ten seconds.
Opponents ready? Partner ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Alright, quick off the clock. I'm going to be going framework and then voters. And with that, I'll be it. Starting with the framework for today's round. The framework for the round is justice, not a cost-benefit analysis. And we are showing you justice on the pro side with having support for U.S. effectiveness and reparations. Now with that, going on to the first vote in today's round is U.S. support for the effectiveness. From Coalition for the ICC 16, it starts that the U.S. can demonstrate its renewed commitment by exerting influence within the Council to protect and ensure political interests don't block the court's common interest. And then we are winning on scope here because other countries like Colombia has enhanced the judicial Colombia's encounters with the ICC enhanced their judicial system, so the ICC is helping Colombia, and then in turn it will help us if we join it. And second vote in today's round is reparations. We win on scope here because the reparations are helping countries like the DRC, and we win on magnitude because we are giving $30 million to the reparations. And the reparations is a core feature of the ICC. And our opponents are trying to tell you on this point is that we're already able to donate, but if we join, we can help out with the reparations that are being delivered to the DRC. Now, third vote in today's round is fundamentally following. Our opponents, Subway E and F, talk about supporting dictatorships and political gain. However, we win on this vote because the ICC has a broad membership with 125 countries, and then the multitude of those other countries involved are not dictatorships. Nothing in the ICC shows support for dictatorships. So if the U.S. were to join, the ICC would not support them because there's nothing in the ICC that shows support for the broad membership. And that's why you're voting pro in today's round.